The single elemental goal of movie marketing is to get your butt in a seat to watch a film, no matter what. And while there are legal limits to how studios can sell their products, they can nevertheless misrepresent a movie if they think it might benefit them. So, with that being said, I'm Jem from WhatCulture.com, and here are the recent movie trailers that lied. Taskmaster's role in Thunderbolts. Now, to be fair, eagle-eyed Marvel fans were definitely suspicious about the rather subdued role of Taskmaster in the trailers for Thunderbolts, namely that she wasn't present in any of the group's shots alongside her co-stars. However, the trailers still name-dropped Taskmaster as a core member of the group, and so it was assumed by most that she would simply be the first casualty. But as it turns out, Taskmaster dies just 20 minutes into the film, before the titular group has actually been formed. During the anti-heroes' initial meeting at the OXE facility, Taskmaster is swiftly shot in the head by Ghost, following a brief battle, bringing the character's screen time to a grand total of less than 2 minutes. Considering that Taskmaster was not only named on screen in trailers but also featured prominently on all of Thunderbolts posters, it's understandable that fans were pretty miffed about this, especially after she got such a short shrift in the Black Widow movie. Next up, the vampires show up much later in Sinners. The trailers for Ryan Coogler's Sinners did a fantastic job of selling it as a visually stunning and wholly unique take on the vampire movie, though the final film ended up being somewhat quite different even from that, but most certainly for the better. For one, the vampire aspect doesn't really announce itself until the film's second half, and even then, Sinners doesn't become a more pronounced vampire movie until close to the third act. So much of the first hour plus is spent on setting the scene, establishing the mood, and focusing on character development. More to the point, Coogler places an unexpectedly huge emphasis on music throughout. Enough that you could certainly call Sinners as much a surprise, unhinged musical as a vampire film. It's easy to see why Warner Bros. Focused their marketing on the broader horror elements rather than the bolder vision, yet considering the phenomenal critical and audience response, it seems that most were still pretty happy with this superbly original genre remix. Then we have less Mickeys than you thought in Mickey 17. For the great many who have not read Edward Ashton's novel on which Mickey 17 is based, the film's marketing made it seem like Robert Pattinson would be portraying many clones of Mickey Barnes throughout the runtime. One of the trailers straight up lists Mickey 1, Mickey 11, Mickey 17, Mickey 18 as prominent characters, and the film's posters also show more than a dozen versions of Mickey at once. But in the final film, most of the Mickey clones are only glimpsed fleetingly in brief gags leading up to their deaths, with only Mickeys 17 and 18 being major characters in the overall narrative. To some, the prospect of seeing numerous Robert Pattinsons squabbling and struggling to coexist seemed like the entire selling point of the movie, and so for the bulk of the story to revolve around just two of them was somewhat disappointing. We're not saying that that's why the film flopped at the box office, but more Mickeys might have helped. Eric doesn't die in the tattoo parlor, Final Destination Bloodlines. The first teaser trailer for Final Destination Bloodlines focused on a single scene where Eric, played by Richard Harmon, finds death catching up to him in the tattoo parlor where he works. After a series of near-miss incidents, the trailer ends with Eric being dropped into a raging fire, heavily implying his death. But what a clever misdirect this was. Inexplicably, at least at first, Eric manages to survive the inferno due to his leather jacket protecting him from the fire, and it gets even better from there. In the next few scenes, we keep waiting for Eric, the apparently next person in line for death, to be horrifically killed, only for him to be skipped and his sister, Julia, perish next instead. However, we subsequently learn that Eric was the product of an affair and therefore not part of the original Campbell bloodline, confirming that he was never really being targeted by death at all. But in another fun surprise, Eric is later killed by death while trying to prevent the demise of his brother Bobby, because as William Bloodworth mentions earlier in the film, death doesn't like it when you F with his plans. Considering how many fans complained about the original teaser trailer showing way too much leading up to Eric's implied end, what a brilliant bait and switch this all was. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and while you're there, drop us a like, share and subscribe too. Next up, not your typical war movie, Warfare. The trailers for Alex Garland's war film Warfare unsurprisingly focused on the intense action, suspense, and apparent masculine bonding among its central squad of soldiers. The intent clearly was to make the movie appeal to fans of action films and war flicks, even though Garland's movie could not be further from an adrenalized fist-pumping romp. Yes, there is plenty of action and suspense throughout Warfare, but tonally there is nothing even remotely celebratory or entertaining about it. This is as much a horror film as it is an actioner, with Garland co-director Ray Mendoza almost explicitly focusing on the physical and psychological toll of living through any combat scenario. Warfare is less about the sexy money shots the trailers focus on than anxious silences and prolonged glimpses of human suffering, which compromise far more of the movie's runtime. Though it's easy to see why A24 marketed the film this way, it's also not remotely shocking that more casual moviegoers came away expecting something more approachable and, dare I say it, enjoyable. Next up, it is way weirder than it looks in The Surfer. Not entirely unlike Warfare, the trailers for Nicolas Cage's new thriller The Surfer made it look like a much simpler, more broad-skewing film than it actually is. Taking the trailers at face value, you'd largely assume this to be a dead simple movie about a man, Cage, who ends up facing off against a gang of criminal surfers. We've all seen similar movies before, and the trailers didn't make too much of an effort to present the surfer as anything outside of the ordinary. But oh boy, this movie is bonkers. Yes, it's fundamentally about Cage's unnamed protagonist taking on a surf gang, but it's also spiced with so much weirdness. Above all else, there's the fact that the surfer gang is actually a cult of toxic alpha males, and Cage's protagonist spends the bulk of the movie descending into madness, culminating in him trying to force-feed a dead rat to one of his assailants. This is without even getting into the several bizarre subplots or its increasingly kaleidoscopic style, all of which the trailers tended to ignore, presumably for fear of scaring off general audiences who thought they were getting a John Wick-flavoured action thriller. Next up, Daniel's barely in it in Karate Kid Legends. The marketing for Karate Kid Legends largely revolved around the fact that the film would be uniting the two eras of the Karate Kid, the original led by Daniel LaRusso and 2010's remake represented here by Mr. Han, played by Jackie Chan. The trailers went all in on this, focusing on Daniel and Mr. Han teaming up to train a young new martial artist and seemingly promising that the movie would be a nostalgia-soaked catnip for fans of the franchise. Yet, Karate Kid Legends ultimately only does the bare minimum in this regard. Mr. Han has a relatively small supporting role in the first half of the movie, spending much of it back in China, while Daniel does not show up until the third act. And considering that Legends is just 94 minutes long, that means fans don't get to see much of Daniel at all, let alone savour his ultimately sparse, forgettable interactions with Mr. Han. A Karate Kid team-up movie should have been a slam dunk, and yet it ultimately felt like more of another remake with relatively inconsequential appearances from two of the series' most recognisable characters. Next up, new threat, but not really. Until Dawn. The first trailer for Until Dawn proved wildly decisive with fans of the video game, many expressing disappointment that it wasn't a straight adaptation of the source, which frankly was a rather boring prospect anyway. Instead, the film adaptation tells a new story cut from the same cloth, introducing a time loop mechanic where the central characters start the night anew each time they die, and they can only escape the loop by surviving. Wait for it, Until Dawn. It was a pretty neat idea, honestly, and the trailers also emphasised the notion that each new time loop offered up a new threat, with a tease of a found footage sequence implying that each loop was effectively gonna be homage to different subgenres of horror. But ultimately, just isn't the case. Though the protagonists do face a glut of threats throughout the film, they're still terrorised by the same master silent from start to finish, and each new loop does not playfully riff on a new type of horror movie. Considering that even the director David F. Sandberg himself straight up said that each new loop would take place in another horror genre, it's pretty disappointing that this really wasn't what happened. Next up, Samara Weaving and Ray Nicholson's shared screen time in Borderline. The trailers for horror film Borderline made it seem primarily focused on a cat and mouse game between Samara Weaving's pop star protagonist and her deranged stalker played by Ray Nicholson. Yes, son of Jack. Yet in actual fact, Weaving and Nicholson's characters don't meet until almost halfway through the movie, and beyond that they they only end up sharing about 15 minutes of screen time together in the remainder. This isn't to say that Borderline is a bad film or an outrageous letdown in any way. It's still plenty of fun, thanks largely to Nicholson's swinging for the fences performance. However, anyone lured to the film by the interplay between the two leads in the trailer might have felt like they were sold something else, and understandably be a bit crestfallen that the two central characters are kept at arm's length for the vast majority of it. Next up, it's not just an anthology. Predator, Killer of Killers. The first trailer for animated anthology film Predator, Killer of Killers dropped just 2 months before it hit streaming platforms and seemingly held nothing back about its tantalizing premise revolving around 3 warriors, a Viking, a samurai, and an American fighter pilot doing battle with predators across 3 distinct time periods. What both of the movie's trailers neglected to reveal, however, is what these 3 stories were building towards: a third act in which the trio team up to do battle with a predator warlord. As for how 3 people separated by a millennium's worth of history can exist at the same time, as it turns out, the predators end up placing each hero in suspended animation following the conclusion of their respective stories, before rousing them in the future where they're commanded to fight to the death. In case it isn't clear, this is absolutely a case where the studio was right to keep their ace hidden up their sleeve. Having the third act tie in the 3 tales together in a meaningful and satisfying way was a hugely pleasant surprise.